All right, so let's go ahead and get started this afternoon. All right, so as I said, this is the first meeting of the year. This is the webinar series for the year is entitled Conservation in North Carolina. Today's the kickoff meeting of the year. So congratulations for coming today. We appreciate your participation. Our second webinar will be on June 9th on how your land matters, followed by a third one on September 8th, conservation in practice, followed by a fourth one on first one on September 8th, and the last one in December on the 8th of the month, taking action and where to start. So that would be our webinar series that will be coming up through the year. So we hope you guys can put that on your calendars and make plans to join us in the future. Coming up very quickly next month on May 19th, we have our first in-person gathering since before COVID started. For those of you that have been with Forest Her for a while now, we used to hold long workshops where we could gather in person and share and talk. Come next month, May 19th, it's a Thursday afternoon, starting at 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock over in Jones County, which is near New Bern, Kinston, Jacksonville, that area over in the coastal plain. So if you'd like to come spend the afternoon and talk about land stewardship and conservation, we would love to have you. Karen Plaster it will be on the property of Karen Plaster. She is one of our foresters as well. She's on our executive board, and she has offered to take us on a field tour of her property and some of the things that they are doing down there to manage their property. If you follow social media at all, you might have seen her. She's been building the She Shack down there, and so she's got a nice little gathering place for us to get together and spend the afternoon talking about stewardship in North Carolina. So make plans for that. All right, so today's agenda, what we're here for today. My name is Jennifer Johnson Roach. I'm a district forester with the North Carolina Forest Service. I kind of work in the Piedmont area. My office is in Hillsborough. I lead a team that over an 8-county area to ensure that our Forest Service programs are being carried out. But more importantly today, we have a great opportunity for folks to participate. So this is going to be a little different meeting than what we've done in the past. This will not be a meeting where we throw up slides and presentations and a professional sitting there telling you about practices and timing or making recommendations or what have you. This is going to be an opportunity for you folks out there in virtual land to offer your thoughts and ideas. And Fallon Owens, an extension wildlife biologist with the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission, is going to walk us through this unique activity and ask us some questions and give everyone the opportunity to respond. And then after that, will be followed by a panel discussion. And we have 5 ladies who have graciously and bravely agreed to step up and share their thoughts and opinions on the same questions that we're going to ask you. So we have a great afternoon planned for you. As I said, today's meeting is a little different, which there's a lot of things that are different. We're also using a different platform. So if you had joined us in the past and you were used to asking questions in a Q&A box, you will not find that on your screen today. That is not available. The chat box will be the only way that we can really communicate back and forth. The chat box today will be our friend. We are going to post a lot of information in that chat box. Fallon is going to walk us through these things step by step. But we want folks to be able to find that information. So because we're going to be posting a lot of links in there, I'd like to ask you just to hold your questions until we get through this next activity. Try to refrain from responding in the chat. Normally, we want to hear everything about you, where you're at, where you're joining us from. But for this next activity, I'm going to ask you just to refrain from that for now and kind of hold off on that until we get through this. That way, the information is very quick and easy for us to see and get to. All right, well, with that, I'm gonna turn the floor over to Fallon. I guess one more thing before I do that, Fallon. I just want to encourage you, this is gonna be a little different. We are stepping outside of our box. We're trying to try something new, an opportunity to actually try to create a conversation. And through the virtual world, that can be a little difficult. So this is the first time we've done this, so bear with us. I encourage you to participate. But for some reason, if sometimes folks are unsure about clicking on links or are not sure if they should participate, don't worry, that's okay. If that's not you, just sit tight, sit right here on this webinar. You're going to be able to hear the responses. You'll be able to see Fallon and the discussion that will occur. So don't worry about that. But if you're willing to try with us and bear with us, I encourage you to try this next activity. We're looking for some fun ideas. All right, Fallon Owens, North Carolina Wildlife Commission. The floor is yours.
Oh boy. All right. Thank you, Jennifer, for that introduction. I do also want to caveat and say this is the first time I've led an activity with this particular platform. I've done it many times where I wasn't leading it. So please, give me some grace if I stumble through this a little bit, but hopefully it'll be really easy to participate, especially if you're on a desktop. I'm not sure how easy this is to navigate if you're on a cell phone. But if you're on a desktop, this is just a matter of following a link, and then I will give you some instructions on what to do when you're on this platform, which is called Linoknit. Basically, we get to post-it notes on a board together virtually. So I'm going to post a link in the chat for a practice activity, just to wet our whistles and kind of navigate, figure out how this works. So in the chat, you should see a link. It's a Linoknit/users/Fallon Owens. So I ask anybody who can or who wants to participate to click on that link, and I'll give everybody a moment, because I think if I share my screen, then the whole view will change and the chat box will be harder to find. So in a second, I'm going to share my screen and show you where everybody should end up if they follow that link. And for those who have clicked the link, you should see a prompt question. And that, like, just for practice, I want to hear where everybody's property is in North Carolina. So assuming that everybody's clicked on that link, is able to see the chat box and it's clicked, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. And so this is where everybody should be. It's kind of a big open palette with the prompt, where in North Carolina is your land? And to answer that, on the right side of your screen, there's a bunch of little post-it pads, and all you have to do is click on one, and it will open up the opportunity to write in anything you want. So I'll say that my house is in Raleigh, North Carolina, so I'll type in Raleigh, and then I'll just click post. And there you go. It's posted. So as we go, I want everybody who is on here on this forum to go ahead and post a sticky for where in North Carolina your land is located. And we should see them pop up here. Oh, yeah, look at that. We got plenty of them. Awesome. Okay, so it seems like at least 10 or 15 people have figured out this forum. We've got Hoke County, Kinston, Raleigh, Piedmont Wake, Buncombe, awesome, got the mountains. Granville County, Garner, Columbus, Halifax. I'll just move these around so that they don't overlap. I'm sort of practicing this a little bit too, and I'll refresh my screen and see if we have any more. My sister and her husband live in Asheville. I live in Chicago. Oh, well, thank you for joining us from Chicago. That's awesome. Hopefully you'll take lots of amazing notes for your sister and her husband. Jones County, Lawrenceville, Virginia. Hey, there's still a lot of really great information that's relevant for Virginians. Iredell County, awesome. Okay. So I'll refresh it one more time. There we go. And let's see, Mount Holly, awesome. Town of Hertford, Oak Island, awesome. We got a little bit on the coast here. And okay, so it looks like we've got sort of centered a bit around for the Piedmont, but also we've got some representation from the coast and the mountains too. Great. And with that, I suppose we can move to the actual first prompt question. And this next one is a little bit more complicated, but I want you to think about it, and I want you to really provide some well thought out answers for the next one. I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quickly. And I'm going to share another link. So this is going to be for our first meaty prompt of this activity. So this won't be the same one that we did before. This will be a different link. Make sure that you're clicking on the link that says question 1. That'll take you to what we're going to be working on next. I'll give everybody a second to re-find the chat box and to find that link that ends with question 1. And for those that have already clicked on it, the prompt is, what does conservation mean to you? So feel free to go ahead and think about what your answer is and post a sticky note with the answer to that question. Okay. So I love this. I see lots of post-its. That makes me happy. Lots of people participating. I'm just going to rearrange these so that we can see all of them. Let's take a look. I see preserving my land for future generations. Okay. Thinking towards the future. Conservation is keeping or helping as much of the land as possible to grow or regrow back. Working with the environment to maintain a healthy system. Wise use, or in other words, sustainable use. It's great. Keeping the soil healthy. I'm really glad to see somebody hone in on soil health, because that's fundamental to so many aspects of growing living things. Protecting animals, plants, and their habitats. Protecting the natural environment. Let's see. Conservation means to work with the land and manage it with ecological, economical, and social objectives in mind for the present and for the future. Okay, so I see a lot of comments that relate to sort of the future, making sure that the land and our resources are available and stay unchanged into the future. That's great. Refresh my screen again. Looks like there's a couple of new ones. Protecting the forests from detrimental effects. Pulling back from development and exploitation. Sure, which development can in some ways go sort of contrary to conservation. They're not always sort of fighting against one another though. And that's a whole science in and of itself, sustainable development practices. Let's see what else. No waste, overuse, or destruction. I like these themes that are emerging. There's a lot of people talking about the future, a lot of talk about sort of protecting what already exists, not wasting or not exploiting our resources in an unsustainable way. Oh, we got somebody wrote here about anthropocentric, which is a great word that means human-centered. So it's like, I'm trying to be less anthropocentric when I think about nature. Conservation to me would mean allowing ecosystems to flourish. It's great. It's a great comment. Awesome. Okay. So I think we have 10 minutes for each of these activities. Does any of our, or Jennifer, do you see any other sort of themes emerging from this that I haven't picked out?
No, I think you've done a great job. I think these are some great answers to this. Love to see the stewardship, the soul health. This is great.
Awesome. So should we?
Biodiversity.
I don't know how long that took. Should we move on to the next one? I'm refreshing and I'm not seeing any more pop up. So presumably everybody who had something really juicy to share has already shared it.
I think so. So. I think this is great. Great start.
Okay. And I think we will be able to share these, like these pages will be up forever. So as long as you have the link, you can revisit this, but we can also take a screenshot and share these for you guys afterwards as well. So let's move on to the next prompt. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that everybody can find the chat box again. And I'm going to put a link to question 2. So we were on question 1, now we're moving on to question 2. So make sure that you click on this link that I'm sharing just now for question 2, which is going to be our second prompt. And that it's a little bit harder, a little bit more meaty. So the next question is going to be, what does conservation look like in practice, especially on one's land, presumably on your land? So I want to see sort of real world examples of what conservation actually looks like. Like what can you do, like physically do, in order to engage in conservation? So we're pulling it away from the theoretical, the 10,000 foot view, and bringing it into the application of conservation. What do people do to make this happen? So again, I'll give us a minute so that everybody can access that link and click on it. Again, that's to question 2, so make sure you got the right one pulled up. Presuming that everybody has clicked on the link for question 2, I'll go ahead and share my screen and see what people have written. And by the way, if you haven't posted, you're in the middle of writing something, please, by all means, keep thinking and keep typing. And we want to see your response, even if you don't have it up yet. This is a hard one, genuinely. Oh, great. Even more responses. Awesome. I'm just going to spend some time evidently highlighting everything all at once for some reason. Moving these around so we can see them. I don't know how I highlighted a million of them. There we go.
And Fallon, is it okay if they think of something else, they can type another post-it note?
Yeah, I'd say that if you have anything good or valuable to add, please, like you can create more than one post-it note. So if you have like 5 ideas, you can either put them all onto one post-it note, or you're welcome to post 5 different post-it notes. That's perfectly fine. Whatever feels good to you. I kind of like the idea of having separate ideas on separate post-it notes, but that's not required.
These are great. So if you're just joining us, if you can find your chat box and click on the link that says "Lie or Not?" question 2. So we'll take you to this page that you're looking at. And then you can answer the question, what does conservation look like in practice, especially on the land?
See if there's any more. Oh yeah, okay. Still have some people posting ones. Awesome. Keep them coming. Keep them coming.
Yeah, this is the kind of the meat of what we do, right? So these are great ideas. You got a lot on there, Fallon.
Yeah, this is really encouraging because there's so many ways to do this, like so many ways to engage in conservation. There's no one way to do it. There's no one focus. So it really depends on what your goals are. And I love seeing people think about how they can connect that theory of conservation, sort of the pie in the sky theory, to actual practices on the ground. So let's see if we've got any more that have popped up. Oh, got a few more. Awesome. In just a second, I'll start reading some of them. Oh, we've got so many, they don't all fit really easily on my screen. I love it. It's excellent. I'm having a hard time getting all of them to show. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Managing non-native invasive plants and animals. It's great. Good water quality. Awesome, definitely. Another one of those sort of fundamental, pivotal building blocks of a thriving ecosystem is good water quality. Composting, it's great. Let's see, for me, it's to see animals and birds thriving in the environment, to see my longleaf pines growing, and to have a pleasant environment in which to walk and observe. So that's almost like enjoying the product of good conservation, is being there to appreciate it. If we didn't appreciate it, then there wouldn't really be a point in trying to conserve it, right? That's great. One of my favorites is, not sure that's why I'm here. I love it. Thank you for posting that, because this is an activity where we get to learn from one another. So even if you don't know the answer, hopefully this is part of figuring out what the answer could be for you. So that's great. Let's see. There are many levels of conservation. At its easiest, it's simply leaving your land alone. Another level is to use your land responsibly by replanting. A higher level is to actively manage to repair past exploitation and damage. I love that, bringing it into like the easy versus the more difficult level conservation practices. That's great. Putting land into a conservation easement. It's awesome. Not letting my cat outside unsupervised. Yes, as a bird biologist, I really appreciate seeing that. Something very simple, depending on your cat's personality, I suppose. But even something like keeping invasive species or pets out of the environment can be an excellent way to help promote conservation. Talking to neighbors about best practices for native plants and animals. Yes, sharing the information that you've learned, not keeping it to yourself, but sharing it with others. It's great. Let's see, I rent an apartment in a dense urban environment, but there's a garden on the property where I can feed the birds. And I'm also planting milkweed this year. Excellent. So that's helping insects, it's helping birds, and also helping milkweed. So native species of all kinds. It's great. Right. Ethical, professional, and lawful forest and wildlife practices. Right. There's a lot lumped into there. But yeah, that's a great summary of a whole bunch of different potential activities. I've got removing the burning bush shrubs surrounding my house and planting native trees instead, with examples: dogwood, redbud, and serviceberry. Those are great natives. Awesome. I love it. And plus, serviceberries can be actually delicious if you manage to get to them before the birds do. Let's see, got some other ones here. I want to think I know what it would look like. I'm thinking plants and animals would be more diverse. Sure, yeah. So always improving species diversity, especially native species diversity, is definitely a great way to sort of improve ecosystem health, for sure. Restoration and replanting of indigenous plants, removing invasive and exotic plant species, eliminating toxins, poisons, and herbicides, adding habitat supports such as shelter, water, food, plants, and rewilding. These are great ways to sort of reestablish a native environment to support a diversity of plant and wildlife species. Great. Jennifer, do you see any other like really great juicy ones popping up that I've missed? There's just all sorts of different ideas here, and I love that there's a lot of focus on native species and removing invasive species. I think that's one of the big themes that I'm seeing pulled out of this, along with all sorts of different practices.
Definitely, there's one about an arborist to keep my trees healthy, and more importantly, working on drainage and water flows to slow and spread and soak water. Very important, particularly in those urban environments. These are great, forestry practices, wildlife management practices, native species. This is great. And like you said, it's great to see folks saying, hey, I'm not really sure. That's what I'm here to learn about. And that's what we're here wanting you to learn about, right? We want you to learn more about how you can do that on your land and what that may look like. This is great. Thinning overstocked forest. Prescribe burns, creating diversity of habitat types for multiple species. I'm assuming that's for tree species as well as for wildlife species, for wildlife habitats.
We got somebody put in here doing soil tests. and learning the historic use of the land and the historic ecology to sort of like try to reset, presumably back to that historic setting. Oh, setting a timeline to make changes. Okay, so I love this because especially, you know, some of you might be looking at this and say that, man, there's just so much. This is overwhelming. Like, where do I even begin? But you certainly don't have to do everything all at once. So creating a timeline and listing out all the things you could do, and then sort it based off of what can you do now, even if it's the simplest, easiest thing. Start with that and then work your way up to things that might take a little bit more time to accomplish, maybe, or are more difficult, potentially more costly. Have that sort of to-do list and the wish list, and you can sort of tick things off as you go. That's great.
And then they added to get professional help too, to help them learn about that timeline. So if you don't know what to do or you're unsure what to do, reaching out and finding those professionals, that's the great start. That is great to see.
I see another one here about water quality, like watching how the water runs across the property and plant to minimize erosion and other water issues. That's awesome. That's great. Sometimes you just have to wait to that really big like storm that comes through and just like washes everything out. And then from there, figure out what's the best way to plant, you know, a rain garden or to establish some deep-rooted plants to keep that soil in place. Awesome.
And Fallon, the one about the many levels of conservation, very true, very great comment. At its easiest, it's simply to leave your land alone. And that's true. You know, a lot of landowners we meet that they think that's the best thing, but then actually going in and looking at your forest and the next level is trying to learn what you have and learn how to maybe improve it or improve the health or improve the diversity. So that's a great comment.
And there's one over to the left that says observation before action. You know, that's wonderful because, you know, sometimes, especially if you're very new to understanding the natural resources that you have on your property, or maybe you just bought your property, just taking a year to just learn about it and walk around and see what there is, wait for that big rain event so that you see what kind of erosion problems you might have when there's a lot of water flowing over the surface. Just watching before you make a game plan of what you can do can really, in the long run, make your efforts much more successful. So not something that you have to rush into, because these are long-term, like conservation is something that happens over the long term. We're talking about seeing the products of that work into the future, potentially into the long-term future. So there's not really always a good reason to rush into it. Great.
And there's a lot of ideas out there, but we're all shooting for the same thing, right? To maintain that landscape, to maintain the healthy forests, those diverse wildlife habitats, working forests, working lands. So it's great to see that even though you think you don't know, I think you actually know more than maybe sometimes we give ourselves credit for. So it's great to see.
I see someone just posted a new one, vote for elected officials who understand the importance of conservation. That is an awesome one. Absolutely. You know, sometimes individual people, you know, landowners like most of us only really have the power to help by doing this work on our own land that we have direct responsibility over. But there are powerful people who can make big changes across North Carolina to improve conservation, and our elected officials are certainly categorized in that group. So yeah, like electing or voting for people who understand the importance of conservation can go a long way. That's a great contribution. Okay. So I know I haven't read every single one, but I think we've kind of covered sort of a lot. There's one about disturbing frequently. Yeah, especially if you're talking about like a fire-prone landscape or a fire-dependent landscape, or even just a property where you want to maintain like an early successional habitat, then disturbing the land frequently certainly can be very important. So Debbie, how are we, or sorry, Jennifer, how are we doing on time? Should we?
Yeah, so we're good. We've still got 10 minutes left.
Okay.
If somebody had a response to something that was up here or wanted to share something like that.
No? We do have one more. There's one more prompt. So
Okay.
we got 10 minutes left. We can move on to that one and have a little bit of time. I see one more added. If the followers lead the leaders, if the followers lead, the leaders will follow. I got to think about that for a second. Followers lead, and the leaders will follow. Yeah, so there's like grassroots, the power of grassroots. I think that's a good one. Okay, so let's move on to our third and final sort of prompt thinking question for this interactive activity. So in order to sort of reset for this final and third one, I'm going to stop sharing my screen again. And I'm going to post the third and final prompt for this activity. And this one is, I'm curious to see what you guys are going to put into it, because to me, I think this can be not necessarily a trick question, but often something that people haven't really thought about unless they're in the conservation field. So I really want to see what you guys think about it. And so I just posted the link to question 3. So make sure that you click on that link for question 3, and it'll take you to a nice clean board with a new prompt. And that prompt is, how is conservation different from preservation? All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And again, by all means, keep thinking, keep writing, and keep posting. Even while we start to talk about some of the posts that people have already made. Oh yeah. Now they're starting to flood in. I love there's like this long wait while people are really thinking about it, trying to figure out exactly what they want to say, and then all of a sudden they just like flood in. I love that people are discovering the colors of the sticky notes. There's the 4 sort of default ones, but then when you're actually on the page, when you're writing your sticky note, there's more color options, and so that's great.
Yeah, these are great.
Right, I'm going to start to read some of these off here. Right, preservation is focused on trying to keep land, buildings, etc. the way it was. Conservation is focused on not destroying the land while still allowing human use. All right, yeah. Preservation keeps things as they are now. Conservation allows for natural change. And then to me, it's the knowing and then the doing. All right. Conservation might be a little more forward-looking than preservation. Conservation is more active and preservation is more passive. Preservation keeps everything as it is. Conservation focuses on the natural habitat and eliminates the unnatural, with a question mark, not sure. See, preservation implies leaving the land untouched, while conservation is more proactive and involved, allowing you to make more of an impact individually or as a group. Let's see. Preservation implies not touching or leaving as is. There's a time and a place for that, but often active restoration and management are necessary to conserve. Many hard choices sometimes. Awesome, that's great. Let's see. Conservation seeks the proper use of nature, while preservation seeks protection of nature from use. They say they cheated and had to look it up. Oh, I suppose that's okay. And there's there's definitely more than one way to describe the difference between these two things. Let's see, preservation equals keeping the land exactly as it is, never changing, no outside influence. No, not really possible since humans have been managing landscapes for thousands of years. Excellent point. While conservation is equal to working with the land in harmony with the ecosystem. Awesome, great. We've got purposeful management versus hands-off, presumably purposeful management being conservation and hands-off being preservation. Preservation may be part of a larger concept of conservation. Okay. Let's see. Preservation is keeping the land the same or restoring it to a certain way it was historically. Conservation is changing the land or allowing the land to change itself over years with no intervention. It's interesting. Let's see. Oh, somebody's got, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you got about 2 more minutes, sorry.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I have no idea how much time I'm taking. Different end goals. Conservation understands that nature is dynamic, whereas preservation tries to keep things static. So yeah, I think like thematically, there's a lot of comments talking about preservation being about like keeping things static, keeping things exactly as they are or as they were, versus conservation being much more hands-on and allowing change, allowing the system to be dynamic. It's great, awesome stuff. Refresh and see if there's any more additions or if any good ones, like really awesome ones that I didn't read, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think you've covered a lot of them.
Yeah, I know I haven't read them all, but I do see a lot of the same themes. Conservation involved restoring healthy conditions rather than simply leaving the land alone. I hadn't read that one yet. Okay, so I guess we've got a couple minutes left, and I'll leave this up. But for the next part of this webinar, I'm really excited that our panelists, which have been doing conservation in some form or fashion for a long time, are going to tell us their perceptions of the answers to these questions. And I really want to see how we can flesh out some of these things when we hear from some conservation professionals, professional conservation professionals and non-professional. Our landowners who have been doing conservation on their land definitely counts. So, okay, so I guess we don't need to belabor this. We can move on to the next part and maybe give us a little bit more time for like the Q&A at the end. So I'll go ahead and say thank you everybody for posting notes, for really thinking about these questions and posting your thoughts. This is great stuff that you've contributed. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Fallon, for leading that activity. That was great. Sometimes it's good to ask yourself these questions. When we got to the part of what does conservation look like in practice on the land, we had to think about that a little bit, right? We had to think about what does that really mean to you as on your land, and maybe as you ride down the road, what does that look like to you when you see something going on? So I think those are great questions to ask yourself and maybe to think about and how that might look like on your land. All right, so thank you again, Fallon. Great answers. I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully it was a little bit of opportunity for you to participate instead of listening to us talk all the time. But so I think it went well from sitting in my seat anyway. So great to see the participation. All right, so our next part of the meeting is we have 5 women who have bravely and graciously agreed to share their thoughts. So these same questions you just posted, they're gonna give a little bit give their opinions on that. And so we've got 5 women coming up, and I apologize for not introducing y'all at the very beginning of the meeting, but we've got 5 women that are gonna share their thoughts. All, I guess I just want to remind folks that this is their opinion. This is kind of who they are, why they study what they study, why they do what they do. And we're going to give them the opportunity to share. So our first panelist will be Amy Phillips, who is a professional or a procurement forester with Weyerhaeuser Company over in the western part of the state. So Amy, we'll give you a few minutes or seconds. You've got 5 minutes to kind of introduce yourself and share your background, and then kind of give us your take on what conservation means to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. I am Amy Phillips. I'm a procurement forester, which is basically a fancy term for a timber buyer, but I also work with private landowners and helping them to manage their lands. You know, sometimes they come to us and the only thing they know that they want to do is sell some timber. They don't really have a plan for tomorrow, let alone 20 years from now. So you know, we try to help them along that path to practice some conservation efforts and put a lot of things in place so that maybe 20, 30 years from now, we can have another conversation with them. So I do spend a lot of time in the education side of it as well as the timber buying side of it. But when I was asked to participate in this, you know, I was told to kind of think about what conservation means to me. And so immediately I just kind of backtracked in time to the earliest definition I can remember ever being taught of conservation. And it was very simple, very short, but very applicable, you know, and pretty well sums it up. And it's, to me, conservation is the wise use of natural resources. You can embellish that, you can build on that, but I'm a keep it simple kind of person. So the wise use of natural resources pretty well sums it up for me. You know, but there's 2 key words in that, and that's wise and use. So, you know, in one of the first activities that Fallon led, conservation, someone posted that conservation to them was kind of related to sustainability. And that's a buzzword that we use a lot in the industrial sector, even in the social sector. You know, we're all concerned with sustainability. And when I give a presentation on sustainability, I kind of define that as being able to use the resources we have today to have the products that we need today without compromising the needs of future generations to have those same resources and access to those same types of products. So I think conservation and sustainability can very easily be interchanged when you're talking about that. The key is finding a healthy balance between using our resources and totally preserving our resources. There's a place for both. So conservation is kind of finding that healthy balance between the 2. In practice, you know, in the professional world, for me, it looks like this. Next month will mark 30 years that I have been with Weyerhaeuser in this same job, in this same location. So I am now going back to tracts of timber that I bought 25, 30 years ago and harvesting those for a second time. And had we not had some conservation-minded approaches to that, that wouldn't be happening. You know, we had to have some conservation-minded harvesting practices. We had to have some conservation-minded thoughts towards the soil and how to keep that soil healthy so that it would grow another rotation of trees. You know, so, you know, we get kind of focused on conservation maybe from my standpoint and say, oh, it's just all about trees. But it's not just all about trees. As Fallon said, you know, the soil is such a, you know, maybe an overlooked component of our whole ecosystem. So, we need to have those conservation practices in place with regards to soil and wildlife and trees and all the critters in the creeks. It all depends on each other. So, without having had that conservation minded approach, I don't think I'd be going back to some of those places for a second time. Last year, our company invested over $30 million in our meal there at Elkin. And a couple of weeks ago, we hired 2 new foresters for that meal. So for them to be able to sit here 30 years from now and say they're going back to tracts that they harvested some years before, and for that meal to still be viable and still be making a product and having the resources needed to do that, we can't do it without conservation efforts in all facets of the environment. So for that to be successful, we've got to take that into consideration. And as far as the conservation versus preservation question, there was one note that went up that really resonated with me, and I think sums it up pretty well. Again, I'm a keep it simple kind of person, but it said purposeful management versus hands-off. And again, purposeful management being the conservation and hands-off being the preservation. I guess in a sense, we would kind of be fooling ourselves if we think that we can preserve any part of our natural environment in a just as it is today state. Something's going to happen to change that environment before we can blink our eyes. So, we want to be able, again, go back to the definition of conservation, wise use. So how can we manage that and use that and protect that, but not just leave it to happenstance and preserve it? Because, if we're attached to the way it is right now, just wait a few minutes, it's going to change. So we can't truly preserve it. We need to just conserve it and use it and appreciate it, as one of the post-its talked about, being able to go through and enjoy the birds and the wildlife and seeing their trees grow, being able to, to just have that purposeful thought to it rather than just leaving it be. So.
Awesome. Okay, great. Sorry to cut you off there. I think we are out of time, but that was awesome, Amy. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And stay tuned. I think we do start to have questions, and I meant to share that at the beginning. Now's the time you can use your chat box. So if you have questions as our panelists start to talk, please type those in, and at the very end, maybe we can go back and ask that. So I see we've already got one for Amy. So Amy, when we get done, we'll kind of ask those questions from you, okay? All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, so our next panelist is Lauren Pharr. And Lauren is a PhD student studying in the Fisheries, Wildlife Management, and Conservation program at NC State University. So Lauren, if you want to take a few minutes, introduce yourself and answer those same questions for us.
Sure, of course. Thank you, Jennifer. Amy, your answer was great. So I'm sitting over here like, oh gosh, how am I going to top that? So it was amazing. But so I absolutely loved the collaborative thinking activity that we just went through. You all gave some wonderful and thoughtful answers to those questions. I am glad that I was asked to be on this panel, because my answers to these questions are going to be sort of me giving like a younger generational approach to my answers. So I'm currently a PhD student at North Carolina State University. And I focus on wildlife, but specifically I focus on birds. So I'm an avian ecologist, and specifically I tend to be interested in the impacts that climate change is having on our avian populations. So just to give you a little backstory about myself. So when I was approached with the question, what does conservation mean to me? The first thing that I always think about, and a lot of you have pointed it out as an answer to that first question during the activity, is sort of preserving things for our younger generations. So preserving plant and animal species, preserving the land that we manage and we work on. I resonated with that, and I related to that so much. So when people ask me this question, what does conservation mean to me? I think about the generations that are coming after me. And I just think about, wanting to continue to conserve these, plant and animal populations. So specifically, and this sort of gets into the next two questions combined. So what does conservation look like in practice, and then conservation versus, preservation? So I will use my research as an example. So currently I am researching a federally endangered species. So I work with the red cockaded woodpecker. And so working with this species, so I've worked with this species. I'm still new, working with them. It's probably going on 2 years now. But I mean, just working with this species and learning about, its history and how it came to be endangered, and just seeing the different ways that, are going into protecting, this species, all the, rigorous management efforts, and everything, just to make sure that their, populations continue to be, doing great. I mean, it's inspiring to me. And so I use my research and this, as an example in order to answer this question, because I think, I want this species, as well as other species, both plants and animals, to be around for, future generations to come. So working alongside these biologists who, have been doing this for a great amount of years, I see that passion and I see that drive that they put into, this management. And I look to put, in that same passion and that same, drive with that as well. So just again, thinking about the younger generations, like right now, for example, climate change, I'm really hopeful actually for our next generations and these generations to come. A lot of the younger generations are beginning to talk about climate change. They're beginning to even teach the older generations about climate change, which is it's really great. So it's great to see that passion is starting at, a young age, and that will hopefully, take us through, a good amount of years when it comes to, protecting our environment, managing our land, preserving these, species, of plants and animals for years and years to come. So all in all, that's sort of, again, bringing a younger perspective to this question, because I am in the beginning stages of my career. So we'll see where my career goes. But I am personally, I enjoy what I do. I absolutely love it, and I get to share that same passion of protecting wildlife, and specifically protecting the species that I'm working with now. So yeah, so that's my take on what conservation means to me.
That was great, Lauren. Yes, definitely. Someone that's getting started in her career, those are the things that we want. The younger generation, we want the older generation. There are some differences about maybe the way we talk about things or look at things. So kind of coming together and talking about these ideas of conservation and how we do that. So thank you. That's awesome. Great job, Lauren. Okay, so our third panelist is Carmella Sturt, and she is the North Carolina Fire Manager with the Nature Conservancy. So Carmella?
Hi, everyone. Carmella Sturt, the North Carolina Fire Manager for the Nature Conservancy. And before I had this role, I was a stewardship manager and burn boss in the Sandhills. So conservation to me, through my work, looks like active management. So I enjoyed seeing the post-its that incorporated that active piece to it. But there was one piece in that active management that I didn't see, which was fire. So that is a lot of my role, ensuring we're utilizing fire in that restoration process on the lands that we're conserving. We also are working with private landowners through our conservation easements. So I appreciated seeing that in the, I think it was, what does conservation mean to you, or what does it look like? that somebody had put in there, putting the land into a conservation easement. So for folks that don't know, the conservation easements can focus on protecting specific conservation values. So it can range depending on the land, where it's located across the state, what sort of resources are on that land. And when there's active management happening through that conservation easement, TNC requires that there's a forest management plan that is written by an accredited forester. So we're making sure that we're following the best management practices on those landscapes and land that we're conserving. And it can be a very narrow scale, focusing on, RCW habitat. So what Lauren talked about within her studies, focusing on that bird, or it could be on a larger scale, focusing on longleaf habitat as a whole. And that can look very different with how we are managing those lands and protecting that conservation value. Another big thing for the Nature Conservancy is focusing on keeping the ecosystems healthy through changes and outside influences like climate change. So Lauren, I think we're right on par with what you're talking about there, which is great to see how much this overlaps for everyone. Yeah, and I think that's me personally. I got into fire through a federal fire agency and came to TNC because I really appreciated the different approach to the landscape. Utilizing controlled burns is it looks very different than responding to a wildfire. And so learning to adapt and utilize fire in a way to restore ecosystems and create healthier systems has really been a part of my passion. And I'm excited to be in this role as the fire manager for the state and continue protecting and restoring the lands.
Awesome, Carmella. Thank you so much. So yeah, so far we've heard from 3 professionals. We've got Amy talking about forest products and having that available 30 years from now. We've got Carmella bringing in fire back into the role. We've got Lauren looking at bird population and wildlife diversity. And so we've got 2 more folks. We've got 2 landowners that have also been brave enough to share what that means to them and a little bit about themselves and maybe what's going on their property. So our first landowner is Louise Belk, and she is from Wayne County. So in the eastern part of North Carolina. So Louise, would you like to introduce yourself and answer some of those questions?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Everybody can hear me, I hope. Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Sound great.
All right, great. I inherited a parcel of farmland near Goldsboro about 3 years ago. And the parcel of land, the perimeter is mixed pines and hardwoods. And my father planted the pines back in 1996 and did absolutely nothing to maintain the land. And then the center section of this property, about 35 acres, was open farmland that my parents leased to a farmer who farmed either corn or soybeans, or generally it was one of the two. All these years, many, many, many years. And in fact, there's a family graveyard right in the center of the cropland. And if I had just preserved the land, I would have probably continued to just lease this land to the farmer. But I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to make this more of a wildlife habitat, because I felt like it just was this barren property like all the other property around me. And I love the comment that one person made in the responses where they refer to getting professionals to help them, because I recently retired from a career in human resources information systems. and zero land knowledge. So the first thing I did was I reached out to people who I knew could help me. So I got the Forest Service to come out and do a forestry management plan for the property. I contacted Deanna Noble, who came out and walked the land with me, and it was a wonderful experience. And she wrote up this wonderful wildlife management plan for me. And then about, I also worked with numerous government agencies to try to see what kind of cost share help I could get. And it was interesting navigating all this through COVID, but I was able to get to become a participant in the Conservation Reserve Program. And so I'm actively doing that. A year ago, I planted 26 acres of longleaf pine. And Carmella, you'll be happy to know that I just had my first prescribed burn last month. And also planted native understory grasses to create hopefully a longleaf pine savanna under there. Wiregrass, little blue stem, big blue stem, native black-eyed Susans, coreopsis, goldenrod. It's great because there's a big Duke Energy easement of power lines that run through the property. So I can't have trees there. So I have the grasses planted under those power lines in the areas where I can't have trees. So what I'm trying to do is to make this a little bit of a wildlife oasis, if you will. There's an area right in the middle of the farmland that's too wet to support longleaf pines. And so the guy who planted the pines, he said, well, I'll put some bald cypresses in there. So he planted bald cypresses in the area that's too wet to support the pines. And then there was a small section that was not big enough to have longleaf. So he planted some oak trees there. So I've got a little bit of a diversity of things going on. And so I'm hoping to burn every year as long as they're in the grass stage. And I'm hoping that it will be a beautiful place in about 10 or 15 years for my grandson to go out and enjoy. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Louise. That was great. Great to hear active management. You know, a lot of the things we've heard so far is about active management, the great things you're doing out there. So thank you very much. All right, so our next panelist is also a forest landowner, and her name is Edna Williams, and she is from Halifax County. So Edna, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I definitely enjoyed the activities, very interactive, and I enjoyed our last landowner tell about her land, because I definitely want to take you through a little walk of what we're doing here on our farm. When I was asked to participate, that's what I kind of reflect on is, you know, what do we have here that I can share that show that we are doing some conservation and on our land. So just to tell you a little bit about us, my husband and I, Tyrone Williams, we are owner and operators of 40 acres here in Eastern North Carolina, which is Halifax County, and it's actually the town of Enfield. We have 45 acres, which is part of a large 195 acre family farm that was purchased in 1916. We are proud to be a century farm, and we have 2 recognitions, one from the Department of Agriculture in North Carolina, and from the Century Landowner Recognition Program through the Winston County Self-Help Cooperative in Mississippi, which is a national recognition program. We are proud of those 2 honors. We are a row crop rental property, tree farming, and natural gardening operation. What does conservation now mean to me as a landowner? Actually, I'm looking at the protection of the resources that's entrusted with me and us having this land to make sure that we take care of it in a most gracious way for generations to come. We are working with management plans to help us along the way as a guide, so that as we execute our actions, we have something, a blueprint that will help us in our process. The management plans, we didn't develop them on our own. Deanna's name came up. Thank you, Deanna. She's part of that wildlife management plan that we have. And we're trying to make sure that we follow that plan. We also have a forest management plan that was with the help of the Forest Service, helped us to put that together. So we're proud of our partners that are helping us in our effort to move forward with the land. Our family is very important to us, to make sure that we spend time together, that we have many talks together, that we build trust as we move forward in the future, so that we can enjoy the treasure that we have. We consider this land a treasure. We really plan to invest in it, to replenish it, to improve it, for the future. So as a family, we definitely come together, to talk about things so that we can share our many physical attributes, our talents, and our abilities to make sure that our forefathers will be proud of what we're doing with this land. As I stated, we have 45 acres, 20 of which are forestry. We have 2 tracts that are certified tree stands. One of them is actually a forest steward certified tract. So that's one way we're trying to keep things going. The soil is important to us. I'm glad someone mentioned about the soil, because we look at keeping the soil, looking at the chemistry matter of our soil, looking and reading our soil tests before we do several things. So we want those regenerative practices to be continued here on our farm. We're looking to be pest-free, invasive species free, and to protect our land, most of all for profit. We definitely want to get a profit out of it. But as we look at the water on the land, there is a need for us to have some quality water, because we need to have sufficient moisture, for our trees on the land. So we want to look at making sure that we take care of the water, and that it is pollutant free as a practice. We participate with the Adopt a Highway program. So we're walking this land constantly, picking up and making sure, because we're living out in the country, oftentimes people throw things out, that could be harmful, to the wildlife moving around. So we try to make sure that we keep things kind of cleaned up to support the fishing. And as I said, for the wildlife, we have rain barrels on our property that we collect water in that way also. As for the wildlife, I am a certified beekeeper, believe it or not. And the pollinators are important to me on the land. So, I don't fight the bees anymore. I let them kind of just do their thing. And and it's very good for my natural gardening. I'm doing a natural gardening, and it's pesticide free. It's not organic, but it's naturally, grown. And I tell people when they buy things from me, if it's got some holes in it, that means that the bugs love it. It tastes good. So I'm using actually no pesticides, no herbicides, as we doing things here on the farm, especially with the gardening. Another thing, we did some feather edging, if you're familiar with that. We actually had some EQIP funds, and those funds helped us to do the feather edging. And we noticed that that actually created a habitat and a support system for a lot of the wildlife on the farm. So we're proud of doing that. With recreation, we use those fire breaks. We use them personally, you know, for walking trails, ATV, bike riding, and we have friends and family that are out here on the farm, you know, all the time enjoying the natural things that we have, especially the natural observation. I enjoy that myself because I like the bird watching. I heard somebody talk about the bird watching of birds. And I really like watching the different species of butterflies that come around also. So we actually are doing as many things that we think naturally, you know, preserve the land and to make it better. We are part of a volunteer agriculture program, and that's one of those renewable programs for every 10 years. It actually encourages us to protect, you know, the property that we have and our working forests. That signage on that program actually says, you know, that we are committed to agriculture in this community. And as people go in and out of our property, you know, the logo of that Halifax County Agricultural Farm District sign says to them that we want them to understand rather that conservation and preservation is what our community is all about. Thank you.
That was great. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. As you can hear from our last two panelists are landowners, and as they talk about what they've been doing on their property, they talk about seeking professional help if there's something you don't know, starting with that forest management plan and using that as a blueprint to help you, and some of the active management and working with the different partners and cooperators to help you understand what's on your land. And then as we talk, you know, it also helps to remind us all that your land may not be like your neighbors. And that is why you need a forest management plan, so that you can find out what you actually have and what the land and what the soil can do for your property, or for to help you recognize your goals and objectives. So great things here. Ladies, thank you so much. That was awesome. That was great. Wonderful. I think we couldn't have asked for anything better. That was great. And so hopefully all you out there in virtual lands enjoyed listening to our landowners, listening to our professionals, and just hearing what conservation means to them and kind of why they do the things they do. We did have I think we only had maybe one or two questions. If you have a question you wanted to ask of one of the panelists or Fallon, we still have a few minutes if you'd like to. We did have one question for Amy. Amy, this question was just about your company, assuming Weyerhaeuser, and just looking at it's a little confusing, but a second product that is a non-tree bioproduct, or sell the right of harvest to another company. So I'm not, maybe Catherine Graham, if you're on there, we could unmute you if you wanted to ask that question yourself, kind of live in person there, or live in virtual land. Or Amy, if you wanted to respond to that a little bit more about Weyerhaeuser.
Yeah, sure, Jennifer. I was able to read that question in the chat, so I kind of took that maybe to be a biomass product. And where I am out of Elkin, we do not harvest for biomass. Where we're located, we're just so far from that market. It's not practical to do that. We do have some folks in the area, not any of our contractors, but we do have some folks in the area who do chip the brush and the unmerchantable products that will go either to fuel or into other products away from our meal. But as far as Weyerhaeuser, there where I work, we do not, we try to manage that non-merchantable residue in such a way that it can become a benefit to the land. A lot of times when practical, we like to leave it scattered out so that as it rots down, it can just be a natural fertilizer to that area. You know, if the landowner is going to keep that in a forested state, then as that slash begins to rot down, it provides a fertilizer, it provides an ecosystem for, you know, rabbits and mice and things like that, that all work together in that ecosystem, and bugs and those kinds of things. So it may not look all that pretty, and it may seem to some extent that you're not using the resource well, but the resource is actually providing another use other than you know, manufactured use. So I'm not sure if that's hits what the question was really intending or not.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Amy. I think Catherine was trying to, she added a few more notes, just thinking about the non-tree living systems. But I think maybe I think you've answered some of that. Okay, so if anyone else has any more questions out there, feel free to type them in the chat. We do have a shout out to Lauren, one of our panelists there, in an article that she was in. So on some of her birding work. So shout out to Lauren. And then we also have another comment about, looks like Linda was on a trip to Antarctica. So that sounds awesome, number one. But she was talking about it being warmer in Antarctica in January than it was here in North Carolina. So going back to that climate change comment that I think Carmella and Lauren, I think you ladies were talking about. So yes, some comments there. And then lots of comments about even one that she'll be calling the extension office tomorrow for an appointment. And so looking for that professional help. So that is great to see. So reach out to those folks and find the professional that is right for you, that can help you, number one, with what your goal is and where to start. So that's awesome. All right, well, I don't see any more presentations, so I'm going to share, or any more questions, I'm sorry. So I'm going to share my screen again and just kind of share a few more things here. So first of all, this is great, ladies. Thank you so much. We hope you guys enjoyed a little bit more interaction than maybe we've had in the past. So we just wanted to remind folks again of the save the dates. So remember, coming up in a few weeks on May 19th, that's a Thursday afternoon from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock down on the coastal plain in Jones County. It's kind of near Kinston, Jacksonville, New Bern, kind of situated around there. Karen Plaster, one of our forest landowners and also a board member here with Forest Her, is going to give us a tour of the property that her and her husband own together down there. And she's got a great gathering spot that we can get together and spend the afternoon, number one, just seeing some practices on the ground, hearing from another landowner about what conservation means to them, and actually seeing those practices that they've been doing. And then just a chance to interact with other foresters or other women in your community or around the state to find out maybe what they've been doing or some of the challenges that they've had or maybe who they've reached out to. So a great opportunity to spend a few hours in the afternoon if you're in the area or just want to take a drive that afternoon and talk about land stewardship and what that means. But by all means, don't worry, this is our first in-person workshop. So those of you in the Piedmont and the mountains, we're still in the planning stages to get some in-person field tours out there as well. So stay tuned for all of that. And don't forget, this was only the first webinar of the year. So we've got 3 more coming up. And we hope you will put those dates on your calendar and will join us in the future. Ways to connect with Forest Her, check out our YouTube channel. As we said, this meeting today was recorded and we will post this on our YouTube channel. And the way you find it is if you just go to youtube.com and type in the search box Forest Her NC. Make sure you type in North Carolina and it will take you right to the site where it will show all the previous recordings, the previous webinars that we've had. So a great opportunity to go back and you can review those, play those, stop those, however many times you like to get the information that you're looking for. So there's a lot of information out there. Check it out if you have some time. other ways you can connect. If you're a social media person, like to do Facebook or Instagram, check out our sites there. Join our Facebook group. That is a great opportunity to learn more about what might be happening. It's a great opportunity for you to share what's happening on your land with others, or ask questions. Or if you've got a local community event that's occurring, it's a great place to share those things from you guys. And of course, we also have our email list. So if you got an email about this meeting today, you're on our email listserv. But if not, and you would like to be, just send us an email to foresternc@gmail.com, and we will add you to that. We definitely want to make sure you get information about upcoming events in the future. All right, well, my screen's not moving here. So, yes.
It seems like Emma posted a question in the chat about inheriting an easement, and I just wanted to throw out a quick recommendation to her to speak to that easement holder. Anybody that is holding those easements will want to develop that relationship with the next owner of that property, and will want to figure out ways to make that management work for the land. And so I don't think any easement holder wants that land to go fallow. But there are ways around management activities that seem inaccessible with that easement. It's just based off of that conservation value. So there's definitely some activities that can be done, but it'll start with that relationship with the holder, and figuring out the right people and the right forest management plan.
Yes, thank you. That's great, Carmella. I'm sorry I missed that. Yes, lots of things on conservation easements. So thank you for sharing that, Carmella. And I know we had a few more questions. Looks like we've had a lot of folks add some more stuff to this. So, and we can still answer more questions as we go. This would conclude our main meeting. And but we're going to stay on until 3 o'clock, or as long as folks have questions or things they want to share. And so our executive board, our forester panelists, our workshop committee, the panelists are all here. So if you have questions or statements or comments you want to provide, feel free to stay on and talk with us. But if it's time for you to go, and we know your time is valuable, thank you so much for being with us today. I did see that Dakota had posted the registration link to the in-person gathering, or what we're calling the She Shack gathering in the Coastal Plain that's coming up on May 19th. So you can find that in the chat box if you haven't registered for that and you'd like to. But thank you once again for joining us. Bob Barden, who I think I failed to mention, is with NC State University behind the scenes, kind of making sure we can carry this out. He will post a link to our program evaluation. And if you will go into the chat box and click on that link, it should take you to the evaluation, and you will actually leave this webinar. So we just asked.
So Jennifer,
Yes, sir.
there is no link to an evaluation because you guys didn't give me the question.
Okay.
So you'll be able to send it out to them through to their email addresses.
Okay, perfect. All right, so change of plans. So we'll look in your email box over the coming weeks for an evaluation. And if you don't mind taking some time and fill that out and offer some feedback, that's what we use to bring these programs to you. We want to make sure it's things that are applicable to you, and help answer your questions and share information. So be on the lookout for that. I do see Dakota. So Dakota's got a question. All right, well, before we do that, so it's 2:30. So if you have to go, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you soon, either in the in-person gathering or at our other webinars in the future. And but if you'd like to stay on, please feel free. We're just going to pause for a minute and kind of unmute some folks and give folks the opportunity to ask your questions and in live, or you can type them in the chat box.
Yeah, Jennifer, well, before folks go, we actually had a really big announcement today that we're really excited about, because our email list is actually going to change. And so instead of emailing foresternc@gmail, you can actually sign up for our listserv on our brand new website. And I will drop the link to that into the chat box right now. And there it is. So it is live, and we've been working on this for a while now, and we have an incredible email and website master who we've been working with for the past couple of months, and she's great. And so we're really excited to share with you all a Forest Her website. So that'll have everything that you could ever want. But with Forest Her, it has all of our YouTube recordings, it has all of our events, it'll have stories about Forest Her and different Forest Hers and events and things that we're doing, different ways to connect, and answers some other questions that you might have. So again, it's foresternc.org. So visit that. You'll be able to sign up for our listserv, see what events are happening, and stay connected. So thanks, y'all. And everybody did great today. And I'm really excited about this year's conservation focused webinars.
Awesome. Thanks, Dakota. That is great news. We have been looking for that website for a while, so it is great to finally be able to announce that. So wonderful news. You can find information or anything you want from that website, and should help take you should actually show you some of the past recordings and upcoming events. So that is wonderful news. So great job on that and getting that done, ladies. All right, it looks like Kendra says she is in love with the website. So it looks awesome. That is great. All right, so we're gonna stay on here for a few more minutes. So if you have questions and wanna type them into the chat, if you wanna ask one of the panelists a question, or if you just want to know more about Forest Her and maybe how you can get involved, or upcoming events, we'd love to answer your questions for you now. I see lots of well done's and great job, ladies. So, and a very thought-provoking program. And Eva said it gets her, gets her going to do more in her yard and in her community. So that's even better, looking to serve our community and work together. That's great to see. Do we know how many people we've got signed up for the May gathering yet? We've been able to get any numbers on that? Martha says, special thanks to Louise and Edna, very inspiring, and loved Amy's ideas on wise use. So great comments, ladies.
Yeah, Jennifer, to answer your question, we have about, I think right now we have less than 10, when I checked yesterday, folks signed up. So if you do want to go to the in-person workshop in May, it is limited just because it's in person. So it's limited parking, limited amount of space in the little she shack. And so make sure that you get signed up as soon as you can, as soon as you know if you're able to go. I think we set that limit to 20, 25 or 30 folks.
Okay, great. So still some room. And I failed to mention that there is a $10 fee for that as well. So definitely register so we know you're coming, and that should be a great afternoon.
That's for the snacks, right?
Yeah, that's right, for the snacks, like refreshments. And then soon, over the course of the next year, hopefully we can get out to the mountains in the Piedmont, and hopefully that'll be a little closer for some folks, and see some different practices on the ground. That's those native species in that region, those regions of the state. See what folks are doing out there.
It's a little bit different up in the mountains, right?
Very different up in the mountains. Very different. All right, so. All right. Looks like we had some folks looking for a LinkedIn member. So if you are a part of LinkedIn, you can check the chat box and maybe connect with some of these other ladies. Oh, here we got one. I think I totally missed this one here from Emma. Could anyone speak to the complexity of inheriting an easement? Oh, that's what Carmella was talking to. Okay, yeah, thanks, Carmella.
did get, was it Louise just asked if there's going to be another chainsaw training?
Yeah, so I don't know if maybe Jennifer Fawcett is on here or Liz Snyder. The chainsaw safety training has been handled by a group of other ladies that have been working on that. I don't know if they're on here to maybe speak to that. Does anybody else know? I haven't seen.
I do want to make a quick comment, Jennifer. This is Deanna. So we are having discussion on having some skilled-based workshops, like that would involve things like, putting out herbicide or, ATV, running ATVs and tractors and things like that. So we have those things in the works. So we're trying to get some of those things planned for the future.
That'd be great, Deanna.
And I see Mary made a comment or asked about CFEs or continuing education credits for registered foresters. We don't actually have that for this workshop, but as Deanne was talking about, we're looking down the road a little bit more advanced workshops for professionals where maybe they could get some continuing education credits. So not today, but look for that. All right.
We got a great question from Martha about whether husbands are frowned upon at Forest Hurt events.
That is a great question. So nobody is frowned upon. We're reaching out to women for sure, but by all means, if your husband is interested in coming and you'd like for him to be there, that's up to you. Please feel free to bring him. We've just simply been reaching out to women just so that they have an opportunity to share and talk, but by all means, they would be welcome. Louise, you got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, and because it seems to be like it's a very burgeoning industry, this carbon credits thing where people are able to get money to not harvest your timber, and it's only a 1-year contract, so it's not like you have to do a long-term thing. I checked it out. It's called ncx.com, and I enrolled, and it was really easy. And I'm now, if I don't harvest my trees this year, I will be getting money at the end of the forest year, which would be next April, from this NCX carbon credits program. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's great, Louise. That is great to hear. That NCX program is of course, carbon credits have been something that's been around for a long time. They've just had a really hard time about how to figure out how to make that applicable to private landowners and trade that. And that's just where companies are polluting, right? And they've got to put money into other placements to maintain trees or wetlands or other places. But yeah, this NCX seems to be able to offer money to landowners for them to hold off on harvesting their timber for a year. So it's only a 1-year contract, like you talked about. I've heard of a lot of landowners signed up for it. And with it being 1 year, it's a lot less likely to have, it's not a permanent thing, which is what a lot of landowners worry about when we talk about easements or restrictions that stop you from harvesting your timber or using your land the way that you want to or need to. But it does seem to be for just 1 year. So there seems to be a lot of interest in that program.
And you can do it again each year. So it's not like it's just 1 year and that's it. If you want to continue to let your trees grow, you can enroll every year.
Great, that's right. And I think we're talking about basically being paid to hold your trees. The biggest thing is not cutting them for development, but to hold them, to keep it as they stand, to keep it as a forest stand. And you can sign up every year. I think monetarily, I've heard a lot of different things, but I've heard for smaller landowners, it may not be that beneficial, more for something like anywhere from 50 to 100 acres or more. I've also heard up to 200 acres. So I've heard a lot of different things. I haven't actually talked with them myself, but But yeah, offering money, but I think Louise, correct me, the money would be something maybe like that would help pay the taxes on the property for
Yeah,
the year.
yeah.
So, not anything to get rich off of, but helps you maintain your property.
I mean, for example, I've enrolled, it's probably about 35 acres and I'm going to be getting $480.
Great.
It's better than a
Okay.
stick in your eye.
Yeah, there you go. So there you go. So 35 acres and $400. So that's great. And
So I posted in the chat a couple links to some publications on the Extension
Okay.
Forestry website. There are multiple organizations that do this. The one that you guys are talking about is just one organization. If you're in the present use value program, though, you might want to be aware that delaying your harvest could impact that property tax program. Because if you're not carrying out the harvest in a timely manner, that could be grounds to kick you out of the program. So something you'd want to definitely talk to your property tax folks about and everything. So, and if you get kicked out of that program, it can be quite significant compared to the $435 for 35 acres or whatever it was. So.
yeah, so Bob's right? There's always the other side. I was going to call Bob the Debbie Downer, to bring in the bad news.
Oh, I think it's a good program. I think it's just one of those things that you need to look at, be aware of, so that you don't do something that you might already be receiving a bigger benefit through the present use value program, and it could impact you that way. But if you're able to do it, it's, why not? $435 if it doesn't take a lot of effort and stuff, that's great. I think you should do it. Just be aware of the risk of maintaining trees longer and things like that.
Yeah, he's totally right. I'm making a joke out of it, but he's right. Didn't mean that.
That wouldn't
Bob,
be the first time I've been called a Debbie Downer too. So.
But he's right. And if you are in that forestry use tax valuation program and you fall out of that, and each county is different, and that's one thing we have to remind folks as we're talking in these meetings and we're statewide. It's based on where that land sits in that county, and each county is very different. And before you do something, you want to make sure that it's not going to have your property fall out of that tax use, because that's 4 years of back taxes. That's the 3 years of back taxes plus the current year. So that can be very expensive for someone. And then there's other programs like the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. Of course, in our world, we use a lot of acronyms. But that is a federal program that is paying landowners as well significant sums to maintain those growing forests and keep those trees actively growing, and actually to encourage active management and not just to allow those trees to sit there and grow. So you've got a company that's going to pay you to keep your trees for a little bit. So while they're young and actively growing, that's a great program. But then there's also a cost share available to encourage you to keep your forest working in that active management. So figuring out what's right for you. All right. Any other thoughts, questions? I see something here about Franklin County Extension has been offering a really cool land expo series that deals with land use and programs. Let's see, and they're working with an interesting group on the big carbon sequestration project and would love any info on carbon programs that folks have participated in. And I think that carbon sequestration project, that CSP program, if you haven't checked that out or part of that, and once again, depends on what county the land is, but I would check that out, because that is for carbon sequestration, that CSP or Conservation Stewardship Program. Someone correct me with my acronyms there. Conservation Stewardship Program, and that is a federal program. So check with your Natural Resource Conservation Service. It looks like Fallon put the NCX, the carbon credit, carbon trading website in there. We also had somebody ask about any type of legislatures or political groups that would be encouraging land conservation, land stewardship. I'm assuming is what they're looking for. I'm trying to go back and find it. They were just looking for, political information about maybe some of the candidates that might be more pro conservation than others. But that's not something we really have at this time.
Yeah, Kendra chiped in like immediately afterwards with a link to ncforestry.org.
Okay.
So she was right on top of it.
Oh, great. Perfect. I'm sorry.
I saw that and I was like, that's a great question. I have no idea what the answer is. But Kendra was on top of it.
Great. All right. Anything else? I think that was a great meeting. I hope folks got some things out of it and some questions you can go back and ask yourself and talk to each other about, talk to your partners about, and if you're managing your land with someone else, talk with what you want your land to look like. What does conservation actually mean to you and how it looks on your land?
Yeah, what do you think about like getting the screenshots from the activity and just sending them with whatever follow-up, like the evaluation or whatever follow-up email we might be sending? We can say like, here's a memento from the thing.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
Yeah, those
Something to think about
pages
for sure.
will live up on, I think it's pronounced Lino-it, I think, but I have no idea for sure. But they'll live there until I delete them. So those links will stay live.
It is great. I thought it was a cool exercise. I mean, the post-it notes were pretty quick and simple, and looks like most folks were able to follow through. I didn't see any comments with folks having trouble or.
Yeah, when I first saw it at some meetings with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and I thought it was just so easy to navigate and use. And I've been part of several workshops that use that, and I've always been impressed with how easy it is for everybody to participate. So I'm glad we were able to use it, and that I hopefully didn't royally screw up trying to lead the activity.
Well, it was a great
Thank
job.
you.
Very interactive. I liked the idea that you did that because it made it interactive, made people pay attention, and it was thought provoking.
That was what I was going for. Thank you, Edna. I was really trying for that.
That
I
is
know
great.
nothing's worse than like listening to a lot of really amazing information from really, really smart people, but you've been sitting there listening with like most of your brain for 40 minutes or so, and your brain just turns off against your will. You can't help it. You just like can't keep paying attention. So that being able to interact, getting that opportunity to contribute and actively be part of it, I know for me, I need that, because otherwise, doesn't matter how hard I try to concentrate and pay attention, you just can't keep it up for like an hour.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, tomorrow's Earth Day. So hopefully I'm sure there's plenty of exciting events going on in everybody's community. So hopefully everybody can get out and enjoy the weekend. Any other questions or thoughts? If not, then
Party for the Pine at Weymouth Woods State Park tomorrow in the Sandhills, or Saturday, I mean, April 23rd, 10 to 4.
10 to 4.
Yeah, we'll be celebrating the oldest longleaf pine on record, 473 or 74 years old. I should know this.
Study up before the event.
Yeah, I have 2 days.
See, all these events for the longleaf, and I used to work in Eastern North Carolina, and I worked with longleaf, but now I work in the Piedmont. We always forget about the shortleaf pine, and it's always about longleaf.
Yep.
What happened to shortleaf?
474. Okay, I wasn't too far off.
Oh, wow, that is great.
That is an old longleaf pine tree.
Yeah,
Is it-
and walking up to it, you wouldn't expect it, and so that's kind of the fun in it.
I was gonna ask, like, if it looks that old, like in a good way, or if it looks that old and like, maybe it's time
Struggling.
for you to just
Oh, no, it looks really healthy and it's a beautiful flat top. But size wise, the DBH of it, you wouldn't assume that it was the oldest. There's definitely larger longleaf around that are much younger. So yeah, it's a cool thing to think about.
Like slow and steady wins the race, right?
Yeah. And also just really cool to stand in its shade and think about everything it's seen over the last 474 years. Like it's just really, yeah, really cool.
Right on. Neat. Thanks for sharing that, Carmella.
Yeah, absolutely.
So party for the pine. There you go. All right, well, if there's no other questions or comments, I think we can call that a wrap.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer, for
Thank
like
you.
holding the reins and keeping us going.